My beloved child, there is something you need to face from the very beginning. Even though it is not comfortable, if I had willed it, you would no longer be in this darkness by now. Not because I lack power, nor because I am delayed or indifferent. If I willed it, I could touch everything that is holding you back, undo it in a single moment, and place you on the other side as if nothing had ever happened. But I have not done so, and it is precisely this that confuses you. You have asked yourself many times, sometimes without words, why I have allowed you to remain here for so long, why I seem silent, why I did not pull you out when you pleaded. I hear all of those questions, even the ones you do not dare to speak, and I want you to know the truth, not to burden you, but to help you begin to understand how my love works. I do not pull you out of the darkness because I do not want to take away what I placed in your hands from the beginning, to the freedom to choose your step. That freedom is not an extra part of your life, nor is it something I give only to reclaim whenever I wish. It is the foundation of the relationship between you and me. If I were to force you toward the light before you had chosen it, that light would not become a place you belong to, but merely a place where you are put. I am not looking for souls that are placed in the light. I am looking for souls that step out on their own. For only when you move by your own will do you begin to change from the inside. You can see this clearly in everyday life. Changes that are forced are always short-lived, but changes that are chosen endure. I do not save you so that you remain dependent. I save you so that you may mature. Perhaps you did not realize that I have been standing very close throughout the time you thought you were abandoned. I did not stand far away to observe, nor did I turn my back to test you. I stood at the threshold, not hiding my presence, yet not breaking down the door. There were moments when you felt my silence was too heavy, but that silence was not emptiness. It was the space necessary for you to hear your own voice, for you to recognize what is truly holding you back. If I were to rush in and pull you out while you were still clinging, you would follow me with your body, but your posture would still be turned backward. You would leave the darkness, yet the darkness would continue to guide your choices. I do not want that for you. You have left places that no longer fit you, yet carried the same fears with you. You have entered new beginnings, yet reacted with old mechanisms. You once believed that if circumstances changed, you would change as well, only to discover that you were still as weary as before, still as restless as before, still repeating familiar cycles. That does not mean you are weak. It simply reveals a truth you must face. You have moved, but you have not truly stepped. Stepping out of darkness is not about changing location. It is about changing the direction of the heart. If I were to pull you out before you were ready to turn back and face yourself, you would continue living in outward light while carrying inward darkness. I do not want you to live that way. You may feel that these words touch your pride. You want to believe that you are ready, that you have tried hard enough, that if I would only do a little more, everything would be resolved. Let that silence come. Sit with that discomfort without defending yourself, without explaining it away. It is there that a small opening begins to form. I do not need you to be stronger. I need you to be more honest. When you are honest with yourself, you begin to hear the call you have been avoiding for so long. My miracles do not come to break your will. I do not perform miracles by erasing choice. I perform miracles by awakening it. I do not open doors by tearing the hinges apart. I knock. That knock is not loud. It does not frighten you, but it is clear enough for you to know that you are not alone. There have been moments when you heard it very softly, very close, like an invitation, waiting to be answered. I do not rush you, because if you open the door only from pressure, you will close it again once the pressure passes. I wait for you to open because you desire the light more than familiarity. When you place your hand on that door, even with the smallest movement, you will realize that I have been there all along, not to pull you, but to walk with you. This may unsettle you slightly, because it returns to you a portion of responsibility you have grown accustomed to giving away. But that unease is not meant to frighten you, it is meant to awaken you. I do not abandon you in the darkness. I stand there so that you know that when you choose to step forward, you will not step alone. I honor your freedom more than you realize, because I see who you can become when you step out by your own choice. My beloved child, there is something you need to face from the very beginning. Even though it is not comfortable, if I had willed it, you would no longer be in this darkness by now. Not because I lack power, nor because I am delayed or indifferent. If I willed it, I could touch everything that is holding you back, undo it in a single moment, and place you on the other side as if nothing had ever happened. But I have not done so, and it is precisely this that confuses you. You have asked yourself many times, sometimes without words, why I have allowed you to remain here for so long, why I seem silent, why I did not pull you out when you pleaded. I hear all of those questions, even the ones you do not dare to speak, and I want you to know the truth, not to burden you, but to help you begin to understand how my love works. I do not pull you out of the darkness because I do not want to take away what I placed in your hands from the beginning, the freedom to choose your step. That freedom is not an extra part of your life, nor is it something I give only to reclaim whenever I wish. It is the foundation of the relationship between you and me. If I were to force you toward the light before you had chosen it, that light would not become a place you belong to, but merely a place where you are put. I am not looking for souls that are placed in the light. I am looking for souls that step out on their own. For only when you move by your own will do you begin to change from the inside. You can see this clearly in everyday life. Changes that are forced are always short-lived, but changes that are chosen endure. I do not save you so that you remain dependent. I save you so that you may mature. Perhaps you did not realize that I have been standing very close throughout the time you thought you were abandoned. I did not stand far away to observe, nor did I turn my back to test you. I stood at the threshold, not hiding my presence, yet not breaking down the door. There were moments when you felt my silence was too heavy, but that silence was not emptiness. It was the space necessary for you to hear your own voice, for you to recognize what is truly holding you back. If I were to rush in and pull you out while you were still clinging, you would follow me with your body, but your posture would still be turned backward. You would leave the darkness, yet the darkness would continue to guide your choices. I do not want that for you. You have left places that were no longer fitting, yet you carried the same fear with you. You have stepped into new beginnings, yet you still reacted through old mechanisms. You once believed that if circumstances simply changed, you would change as well, only to discover that you were still as tired as before, still as uneasy as before, still repeating familiar cycles. This does not mean you are weak. It reveals a truth you need to face. You have moved, but you have not truly stepped forward. Stepping out of darkness is not about changing location, but about changing the direction of the heart. If I were to pull you out before you were ready to turn back and face yourself, you would continue to live in outward light while carrying inner darkness. I do not want you to live that way. This word may touch your pride, You want to believe that you are already ready, that you have tried hard enough, that if I would only do a little more, everything would be resolved. Let the silence come. Sit with the discomfort, without defending yourself, without explaining. It is there that a small opening begins to appear. I do not need you to be stronger. I need you to be more honest. When you are honest with yourself, you begin to hear a call you have long been avoiding. My miracles do not come to break your will. I do not work miracles by removing choice. I work miracles by awakening it. I do not open doors by tearing the hinges off. I knock. That knock is not thunderous. It does not frighten you, but it is clear enough for you to recognize that you are not alone. There have been moments when you heard it very softly, very near, like an invitation waiting to be answered. I do not rush you, because if you open the door only under pressure, you will close it again when the pressure passes. I wait for you to open because you desire light more than familiarity. When you place your hand on that door, even in the smallest movement, you will realize that I have been there all along, not to pull you, but to walk with you. This may make you uneasy, because it returns to you a measure of responsibility you have grown accustomed to giving away. But that unease is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to awaken you. I do not abandon you in darkness. I stand there so you may know that when you choose to step, you will not step alone. I honor your freedom more than you realize, because I see what you can become when you step forward by your own choice. There is something deeper you must face, and I do not say this to burden you, but to stop you from avoiding the maturity that awaits you. When I wait for you to step out, I am not waiting only for an outward action. I am waiting for an inward consent. There are those who leave darkness through movement, yet continue to live by the reflexes of those once trapped. They go out, but they are not truly present. They enter the light, yet still draw themselves inward as though the light were a threat. I do not want you to carry the posture of darkness into the place I am leading you. That is why I slow down, not to test you, but to give you time to see yourself more clearly. The responsibility of choosing is not a burden I place upon you. It is a sign that you are no longer in the position of a passive soul. When you have lived in darkness for too long, you grow accustomed to things happening to you rather than being chosen by you. You learn to react, to avoid, to endure, to adapt in order to survive. But light does not operate that way. Light requires your active presence, and that presence begins when you acknowledge this. There are places where I will not step for you, because if I do, you will not learn how to stand when I stand beside you rather than in front of you. I am not seeking souls to be led like the blind. I am seeking souls who learn to see and walk with me. You may feel it is unfair to hear that I am waiting for you to choose, because you have chosen many times before and still been hurt. You chose to trust, to love, to be patient, and you were wounded. That history makes you hesitant toward any invitation that asks for yet another choice. I know this. I do not dismiss the times you chose poorly, nor do I deny the fatigue accumulated from choices that were not met in return. But hear me clearly, the choices that caused you pain did not erase the value of choosing. They reveal that you chose from a place not yet healed. I do not fault you for this. I am inviting you to choose again. This time not from fear or lack, but from truth that is gradually being brought into the light. When I do not pull you out, I am giving you the chance to reclaim authority over your inner life. Darkness does not imprison you only through circumstances. It imprisons you through the belief that you have no other choice. Each time you think you are stuck, that there is nothing more you can do, another layer of darkness settles in. I stand to tell you the opposite. You have a choice. Even when you cannot change everything around you, you can choose to turn toward the light. Choose not to let old reflexes lead. Choose not to allow fear to decide for you. These choices may be small and quiet, but they are the foundation of true freedom. There is a fragile moment within you that I continue to wait for patiently. It is the moment when you stop asking me when I will pull you out, and begin asking yourself why you have not yet stepped. That moment does not arrive through sharp reasoning, but through deep stillness, when you dare to remain still long enough to stop blaming, stop self-pitying, and stop rushing toward escape. You begin to see the invisible threads holding you in place. I do not cut those threads for you, not because I cannot, but because you need to see them, name them, and agree to let them go. If I were to cut them before you see, you would think yourself free, only to bind yourself again with different threads. Inner maturity does not come from having no fear, but from no longer allowing fear to lead. I am not waiting for you to become braver before you step. I am waiting for you to step with trembling honesty. There are steps you will never feel ready to take if you wait for every emotion to agree. But light does not wait for you to be perfect before it shines. It shines so that you may be made whole over time. When you step forward in uncertainty, you are learning something essential. You do not need to control the entire journey in order to walk with me. You only need enough trust not to turn away. I know you long for a clear sign, a decisive pull, a powerful action from me so you no longer have to waver. But if I were to do that, you would miss what I am building in you right now, the capacity to listen, to discern, and to respond from within. When I wait for you to step forward, I am teaching you how to live without being driven, how to obey without losing your freedom, how to follow without erasing yourself. These things are not loud or spectacular, but they form a foundation that darkness cannot easily shake. I do not pull you out of the darkness, because I do not want you to become someone who only knows how to be rescued, but not how to live. I am waiting for you to step out so you can realize that light is not a place you are put into, but a place you choose to belong to. And in that very choice, you are becoming the person I have seen for a long time. Even when you yourself have never seen who you are in this way, there is something I need you to look at directly. Even if it unsettles you at first, you can be standing in the light and still be living in darkness. This sounds contradictory, yet it happens more often than you think. You have learned to arrange your life so that outwardly it looks fine, orderly, stable, progressing. You can smile, work, say the right things, and even make decisions others consider wise. But inside, there is another current guiding you, quietly and persistently. That darkness is not in where you stand, but in how you think, how you choose, how you react to the smallest things. I say this not to make you doubt yourself, but to help you stop equating external light with inner illumination. You have grown accustomed to measuring life by what can be seen. When circumstances improve, you exhale and believe you have stepped out of darkness. When major disruptions fade, you assume the darkness has gone. But there are forms of darkness that make no noise, cause no sharp pain, and do not collapse you all at once. They exist as familiar thought patterns, as deeply ingrained ways of choosing, as an inner voice you no longer recognize as not your own. You may be living in a false light, where everything looks fine but never reaches the deepest part of you. And I see this clearly, not to condemn, but to illuminate. Inner darkness often hides skillfully. It does not appear as an obvious threat, but as a series of small compromises repeated over time. You grow used to choosing safety over truth, calm over confrontation, pleasing others over living rightly. Each choice, on its own, does not seem wrong, but when they become momentum, they shape you from the inside. You may say you are living well, yet deep within, you know you are shrinking. I do not need you to blame yourself for this. I only need you to recognize that darkness does not always come with intense pain. Sometimes it comes with comfort. There have been moments when you sensed this misalignment clearly, times when you felt tired without knowing why, empty without a specific reason, unmotivated without any major event. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are living far from your true self. Inner darkness does not crush you with weight. It wears you down through familiarity. It lulls you into sleep within your own life. You stop resisting. Stop questioning. Stop listening to the subtle movements within. I call this darkness not because it is evil, but because it obscures truth. When I say you can stand in outward light while carrying inner darkness, I am inviting you to distinguish between appearance and reality. Appearance can change quickly. Inner reality does not. You can change environments, rhythms, roles. But if the way you think and choose still operates from fear, defensiveness, or avoidance, the darkness remains. It will adapt to every false light you enter. I do not rush you into another place, because I know that if the darkness is not recognized, it will follow you wherever you go. This may weigh on you for a moment, because it forces you to admit that not all stability is peace. There are states that are quiet but not alive, days that are orderly yet lack true light. I do not want you to dismantle your life just to chase a new feeling. I want you awake enough to recognize what is guiding you from within. As you begin to see this difference, you stop rushing to conclude that everything is fine simply because there is no turbulence. You begin to listen more deeply. I know this realization may bring a quiet sadness. It dissolves a layer of reassurance you have leaned on for a long time. But this sadness is not collapse. It is the first act of honesty. When you allow yourself to sink slightly without running away, without rushing to cover it, you create space for real light to enter. True light does not come to decorate the surface, it comes to reach the root. And I only work where you allow yourself to be honest. I do not reveal your inner darkness to frighten you, but to free you from confusion. You do not need to ask whether you are in the wrong place. You need to ask where you are living from. When you realize that darkness can exist even when everything looks fine on the outside, you have entered a new stage of awakening. This awakening is not loud or dramatic, but it is real. It slows you down, makes you reflective, and stops you from equating comfort with life. I am leading you in this direction without forcing, without pressing. I simply place truth before you, clear enough for you to see if you choose to look. Darkness is not only a place, it is a way of inhabiting yourself. And the moment you begin to recognize this, you are no longer fully in the darkness. There is a kind of darkness you rarely name because it does not frighten you. It does not scream, destroy, or pull you down through obvious falls. It is gentle, familiar, and therefore dangerous. You once believed that as long as you could still smile, still function, still maintain a normal rhythm of life, everything must be fine. But I see something else. I see the way you gradually retreat without noticing, the way you stop questioning without realizing it, the way you learn to endure in silence and call it maturity. This darkness does not strike you down immediately. It puts you to sleep. You have grown accustomed to this room, It is not completely dark, only lacking true light. It is warm enough that you do not want to leave. Familiar enough that you no longer stay alert. In this room, you know where to avoid, where to step carefully, where to remain silent. You have learned how to survive without causing further harm to yourself. But surviving is not living, and I see that you have been in this room so long that you have begun to believe it is the whole world. You no longer remember what true light feels like, so you settle for a dim glow just enough to see the path directly ahead. Comforting darkness often arrives in the form of very small compromises. You tell yourself that this much is enough, that you do not need to feel so deeply, that expecting less will hurt less. You begin to dull the sensitivity of your heart as a way to protect yourself. At first, this helps you survive, but when it continues for too long, it begins to numb you. You no longer feel sharp pain, but you also no longer feel deep resonance. You are no longer desperate, but you are no longer clearly hopeful either. I call this darkness not because it is violent, but because it causes you to forget the light that was meant for you. There are days when you wake up and move through your routines as usual, yet inside there is a hollow space you cannot quite name. You are not exactly sad, but not joyful either. You are not in turmoil, but not at peace. You are simply there, moving through the day, fulfilling responsibilities, keeping everything from collapsing. You think you have stabilized, but in truth you have fallen asleep. This darkness does not hold you by fear, but by familiarity. It whispers that there is no need to disturb things further, no need to dig deeper, no need to touch anything that might cause you to feel again. And because you are tired, you listen. I do not blame you for choosing that comfort. I know you have passed through seasons when emotions were too intense, too much, too painful. I know there were times when you wanted nothing more than a place that would not overstimulate you further. But, my child, there is a very thin line between rest and sleep. Rest restores life. Sleep makes you forget that you are living. When you remain too long in this gentle darkness, you begin to call the absence of light normal. You stop expecting anything deeper. You stop believing that you could live more fully than this. Familiar darkness does not ask you to do what is wrong. It only asks you not to do what is true. It does not forbid you from stepping out. It simply dulls your desire to step forward. It does not say that light does not exist. It only makes you forget the need for light. And I see this in your smallest moments, when you choose silence instead of speaking truth, when you smile and let things pass instead of stopping, when you tell yourself that you need nothing more, while deep inside there is a very quiet sigh. These moments accumulate not into a storm, but into an atmosphere where your soul slowly runs out of oxygen. I awaken you not with loud noises, but with the gentle unease you have already felt. That unease is not your enemy. It is a sign that you are still alive. If you truly belong to this comforting darkness, you would no longer feel anything at all. Yet you still sense that something is not right, even if you cannot name it. I am using that very sensation to wake you, not to panic you, but to keep you from sleeping on. I do not need you to run. I only need you to open your eyes. You may feel a slight chill when you realize how accustomed you have become to an incomplete state. That feeling is healthy. It means you are waking up. You do not need to change everything immediately, nor do you need to break out of that room by your own strength. I only want you to recognize that this warm room is not your home. It is merely a place you sheltered for a time, and staying in a shelter too long makes you forget the way back. I do not stand outside this gentle darkness to accuse you. I stand within it as a very soft light, just enough for you to see that another space is waiting. That light is not harsh. It does not force you to leave at once. It simply reveals the difference between living and merely existing. When you begin to realize that you have been asleep, you do not need to step out immediately. Even recognition itself is already movement. And in that very small movement, darkness begins to lose its hold. I do not expect you to become stronger in order to escape this comforting darkness. I only ask that you be honest with yourself about where you are. When you name correctly what has been holding you, it no longer fully owns you. And I am here, unhurried, unpressing, waiting for the moment when you keep your eyes open long enough for true light to touch you. There is a misunderstanding you have carried for a long time. So long that you no longer notice it directing you. You believe that to step out of darkness, you must first become stronger than you are now. You think that if you are stable enough, calm enough, self-controlled enough, clean enough of inner conflict, then you will finally be worthy of stepping into the light. And so you delay not because you do not want to move, but because you believe you have not yet reached some invisible standard. I want you to hear this clearly. I am not waiting for you to be stronger. I am waiting for you to be honest with yourself. That honesty does not require you to fix everything. It only asks that you do not hide what is already there. You have learned to build defenses skillfully. You call them reason, maturity, self-control. But beneath those layers are things you have not allowed yourself to look at, directly motives that are not admirable, recurring thoughts, choices driven more by fear than by trust. You avoid looking because you are afraid that if you do, you will see your weakness. See that you are not enough. See that you do not match the image you are trying to maintain. But my child, light does not come to expose you before others. It comes so that you no longer have to live two lives. When you hide from yourself, you are not protected, you are divided. Inner darkness exists not because you are bad, but because you have not yet dared to be true. There are things you know are misaligned, but you rename them to make life easier. There are choices you are not proud of, but you explain them away to avoid facing them. There are desires you believe you should not have, so you bury them and pretend you have moved past them. But what is buried does not disappear. It simply begins to operate quietly. I am not waiting for you to remove all these things before I come to you. I am waiting for you to name them honestly in the hidden place, where there is no need to perform. The honesty I seek is not loud confession, nor is it exposure before others. It is truth spoken in silence, where there is only you and me. There, you do not need to defend yourself, to edit your words, or to appear better than you are. There, you can say that you are tired, that you are confused, that you both want to step out and want to stay. There, you can admit that darkness does not only hurt you, it sometimes makes you feel safe. When you dare to speak truth like this, defenses begin to dissolve, not because you force them down, but because you no longer need to hold them. There is one thing I am always seeking in your soul, not perfection, but honesty in the hidden place. Not correctness before others, but openness before me. When you try to appear strong, you place another layer of darkness over what is in need of light. When you try to fix yourself before you truly see yourself, you delay healing. I do not need you to come to me as a revised version of yourself. I need you to come as you are, because only what is real can be touched. You may find it surprising when I say that honesty matters more than strength, but think back to the times you tried to change through discipline without touching the root. You forced yourself to do the right things, say the right words, keep the right rhythm, and yet inside, you grew tighter and more strained. Strength that is not grounded in truth becomes a burden. Truth, even when it feels fragile at first, opens the way for real strength. When you dare to say that you are not okay yet, you are not moving backward, you are stepping onto solid ground. I am not waiting for you to resolve every inner contradiction before you move forward. I am waiting for you to stop pretending that you have no contradictions. Light is not afraid of dark corners, only pretense fears being seen. When you allow light to touch what you once hid, you are not torn apart, you are made whole. You no longer have to divide yourself into a part that is acceptable and a part that is buried. And that wholeness makes you lighter. Even if circumstances have not yet changed, you may worry that if you are too honest, everything will fall apart. But what truly causes things to fracture is not truth, it is the effort to keep everything intact by suffocating your own soul. Truth does not destroy, it rearranges. When you name what is present, without adding or subtracting, you create space for me to work. I do not work on the surface coating, I work at the core. And the core is revealed only when you stop performing. I know you are used to measuring progress by how much you can do, how long you can endure, how well you can control yourself. But there is another measure I use, quieter and deeper, whether you dare to be real with me. When you dare, even for a brief moment, you have stepped out of the shadow of pretense. You may not be fully outside yet, but you are facing the right direction. And direction matters more than speed. I am not standing at the end of the road demanding that you meet a standard before you come. I am standing exactly where you are, waiting for you to stop hiding. When you are honest with yourself, you do not become weaker, you become available. Available to light, to healing, to guidance. And from that place, the next step will no longer be a burden you must strain to carry, but a natural movement of a soul that has finally been allowed to breathe. There is a moment in the inner life that you cannot avoid forever. No matter how slowly you wish to go, it is the moment when you stand at a crossroads where no one can step for you, not even me. I know this creates pressure for you. You are used to asking me to open the way, clear the way, make the way obvious so you can simply walk. But there are paths that are not opened by power, but by choice. Not because I do not love you enough to do it for you, but because I love you enough not to do what would keep you immature. There are steps that, if I took them for you, would bring you to the place, but you would not become the person able to stand there. This crossroads is not always as obvious as you expect. It does not always appear as two clearly different paths. Sometimes it is very subtle, a choice between staying with what is familiar even though you know it is making you smaller, or stepping into what is unclear but allows you to breathe more deeply. The pressure does not come from not knowing what is right, it comes from knowing very well what is calling you beyond who you are now. And because you know, you are afraid. Afraid that if you step forward, you will no longer be the person you used to be. Afraid that you will have to release the things that have defined you for so long. I do not see that fear as weakness. I see it as a sign that you are standing before a genuine step into maturity. I once called Abraham in this way, not with a detailed map, nor with a promise that was easy to grasp. I called him to leave Ur, to leave what was familiar, to leave an identity built from land, family, and history. I did not explain everything that would happen. I simply said, go. That step did not only change where he lived, it shaped who he became. If I had dragged him out of Ur, he would have been merely relocated. But because he chose to step, he became a person who lived by faith. You are standing at a similar crossroads now, even if it does not bear the name Ur or any specific place. Its name is identity. You feel the pressure because you know this choice affects not only the present, but the way you will live from here on. Staying feels safer, more familiar, less risky. Stepping out will require you to take responsibility for your life in a new way. I do not deny the temporary safety of staying. I simply tell you its hidden cost. You will continue to live smaller than the capacity I placed within you. The pressure you feel is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that you are standing before a real decision. You are afraid because you can no longer blame circumstances the way you once did. When you are in darkness, you have not yet recognized. You can say that you are stuck, but once you have seen, named, and been honest, the choice becomes clear. And when the choice is clear, responsibility follows. I know you want to avoid that weight. I know you want me to decide for you, so you do not have to carry it. But if I did that, I would take away the very thing I am restoring in you, the capacity to choose and to take responsibility for your own life. This crossroads shapes you not because of immediate outcomes, but because of the direction your heart chooses. When you choose to step forward, even while trembling, you are saying that you trust light more than familiarity. When you choose to stay, you are saying that you prioritize comfort over life. I do not say this to pressure you, but to help you see clearly what your choice is already declaring. Every choice is a quiet statement about who you are and what you trust. I am not standing at this crossroads to push you. I am standing there to watch you grow. Maturity is not the absence of fear. Maturity is choosing rightly, even while fear is still present. I do not expect you to walk with perfect confidence. I expect you to walk with the honesty that has been formed in you through the previous work. When you step, you may feel your balance shift for a moment. That is normal. Every step of growth requires leaving an old posture behind. You need to know that my not stepping in your place does not mean that I am standing far away. I am very near enough that you could turn at any moment and know that my gaze is still there. But I do not take your hand to pull you forward. I allow your hand to make its own decision. In that moment, you are not merely passing through a crossroads, you are entering a different version of yourself. And whatever you choose, I remain there, without leaving. Yet you will no longer be the same person once you have truly stood before this choice. I see that you ask me for many things related to circumstances. You ask me to change people, change environments, change situations, change rhythms of life, change the external conditions that you believe are exhausting you. You trust that if the picture around you were altered, your heart would finally be at rest. I hear those prayers not with irritation, but with deep understanding. Yet there is something you have not recognized. There are times when I do not respond because I am waiting for a different kind of change, not in your circumstances, but in your inner posture. You ask me to move the mountain, while I am waiting for you to change the way you stand before that mountain. You have grown accustomed to seeing life as a sequence of external forces acting upon you. When things go smoothly, you feel light. When things resist you, you feel heavy. You believe peace comes from having everything rearranged into a more comfortable order. But if peace depends entirely on circumstances, it will always be fragile. I am not saying that circumstances do not matter. I am saying they are not the root. There are people in situations far more difficult than yours who remain steady. And there are people placed in better conditions who are still restless. What creates the difference is not what surrounds them, but the inner posture they carry into every situation. You ask me to remove what is pressing on you, while I am watching how you stand under that pressure. You ask me to make the path easier, while I am waiting for you to learn how to walk with a straighter back. You ask me to take away what frightens you, while I am inviting you to see what within you is giving fear its authority. This is the paradox that is hard for you to accept often. I do not change the circumstances immediately, because if I did, you would keep the same inner posture and soon find yourself asking the same things again in a different setting. Your inner posture is the way you stand before life, not with your body, but with your beliefs. There are times when you face the same situation, yet one day you feel it is unbearable, and another day you find you can pass through it, not because the situation has changed, but because something within you has shifted. That is where I am working. And because that work is quiet, you easily assume that I am doing nothing. You want a quick answer, a clear sign, a visible intervention. Meanwhile, I am patiently waiting for you to stop asking me to change everything around you and begin asking me how you are standing before what remains unchanged. This may make you tense, because it takes away the sense of control you have been seeking. You want certainty that if I change the circumstances, you will be all right. But I do not promise you a life without trials. I promise you a life not defined by trials. When your inner posture changes, circumstances no longer determine who you are. You no longer react from old instincts or get pulled by familiar triggers. You begin to respond rather than reflex. And this is a rupture in perception that you must pass through. This rupture is not loud, but it is deep. It happens when you realize that you have been asking me to change circumstances as a way to avoid facing yourself, not because you are wrong, but because you are tired. You do not want to change how you believe, how you expect, how you cling. You only want the external world to soften. I do not blame you for that. I simply tell you this: if you do not change your inner posture, you will always depend on everything outside being fine in order for you to be fine. And that is not the freedom I desire for you. When you begin to look at your posture, you will notice very concrete things. You will see how you enter a day, either in defense or in trust. You will see how you face others, with expectation or with presence. You will see how you pray to me from fear of losing control or from surrender. These things do not change in an instant, but once you begin to see them, they no longer fully control you. Light begins to enter the very place where you are standing. I am not saying that you should stop asking me to change circumstances. I am saying do not stop there. Let your prayers go deeper. Instead of only saying, "Take this away," ask me what within you is being triggered by this. Instead of only asking me to open a way, ask me where you are standing on that path. When you pray this way, you do not become weaker, you become more mature. And it is within that maturity that you begin to see that I am not indifferent to your circumstances, but that I care more deeply about how those circumstances are shaping you. You may feel a small sense of clarity as this becomes real to you, not because everything suddenly becomes easier, but because you stop waiting for miracles only from the outside. You begin to recognize that a miracle is already forming in how you stand, how you see, how you choose to respond. When your inner posture changes, circumstances begin to lose their absolute power. They are still there, but they are no longer the center. And then you begin to understand why some of your prayers have not yet been answered, not because I am slow, but because I am waiting for you to change your inner position. There are times when you fear that because you are slow to move, I will leave. You have absorbed the logic of the world. Those who do not keep up are left behind. Those who hesitate lose their chance. Those who are not fast enough must bear the consequences. Without realizing it, you have projected that logic onto me. When you are still standing at the crossroads, when you are still unsure, when you still need time to breathe and understand what is happening within you, you begin to fear that I will grow weary, that I will turn away, that I will give the light to someone else and leave you to manage alone in the darkness of your slowness. I want you to know this clearly. I do not leave when you slow your steps. I do not abandon you behind. I stand there, holding the light so that you can see the way even when you do not yet have the courage to step forward. I do not measure your faithfulness by speed. I measure it by the direction of your heart. There are those who move very quickly yet walk in the wrong direction. And there are those who move very slowly yet never turn away. I see the trembling in you, the hesitation, the caution formed by times you once rushed forward and had to pay the cost. I do not count these as failures. I see them as memories in need of healing. And while you are still standing there, I do not withdraw the light to force you into a faster decision. I keep the light close enough that you do not panic, far enough that you are not pulled forward. That light does not rush you. It remains. There is an image I want you to hold in your heart right now. It is not a brilliant light that erases all darkness in an instant, but a light that journeys with you. The people of Israel were not led out of slavery by a straight and rapid path. They walked through the wilderness step by step, often slowly, often doubting. Yet I did not leave them, even when they did not always walk with steady faith. Scripture records this clearly. The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel day and night. Exodus 1:3-1. The light did not disappear when they slowed. It only changed form to match their pace. You are being led in the same way. When you slow your steps, I do not vanish. I change how I am present. I become a small light, just enough for you to see the next step, not the entire road. I do this not to unsettle you, but to teach you to walk step by step rather than trying to control the whole journey. If I were to show you everything ahead before you were ready, you would be overwhelmed or pressured to move faster than your true rhythm. I do not want you to live under that pressure. I want you to learn to trust the light for the next step. There are moments when you stand still and think you are stagnating. I see it differently. I see you learning not to run from yourself. I see you pausing so you do not repeat old choices. I see you weighing your steps not because you lack faith, but because you no longer want to move by reflexes that have not yet been healed. Such pauses do not disappoint me. They give me space to be with you more deeply. When you stop running, you begin to hear. When you stop rushing, you begin to see. The light I keep for you is not a reward for the fast, but a support for the faithful. Faithfulness is not relentless forward motion. Faithfulness is not turning away, even while standing still. You may stand there for a long time, but if you are still facing the light, I count that as a step. There are steps not measured by distance, but by the orientation of the soul. And I do not leave you in such steps. I know there are times when you feel caught between two worlds, no longer belonging to the old darkness, yet not fully stepped into the new light. That in-between space is exhausting. You no longer have the old mechanisms to lean on, but you have not yet gained new stability. In that middle ground, I am closest to you. I do not pull you out of it immediately, because this very space is teaching you how to live without relying on surface certainty. I am teaching you to trust light that is only enough for one step. When you slow down, I do not ask why you are not faster. I ask whether you are still looking toward me. If the answer is yes, I remain. I do not take the light away to punish you. I keep it as a quiet promise that you are not abandoned in your hesitation. That light does not force an immediate decision, but it does not allow you to lose direction. And for this season, that is enough. You need to know that faith does not always appear as decisive action. Sometimes faith is simply not turning away when you cannot yet move. Sometimes it is standing within uncertainty without condemning yourself. I see that faith, even when it is quiet, and I respond with a presence that does not withdraw. I stand there, holding the light, so that when you are ready, you do not have to search for direction all over again. I do not promise that the road ahead will always be clear, but I do promise that when you move slowly, the light will not go out. It will walk with you, adjusting to your rhythm, until you are settled enough to step forward again. And in that patience itself, you are learning something essential. You do not have to be fast to be held. You only need to face the right direction and trust that the light will not leave you in the night. There is something I want to uncover within you very slowly, because if I speak too quickly, you will become defensive. What keeps you in place is not the darkness, as you have thought. You have grown used to naming darkness as the enemy, the cause, the justifiable reason for your delay. But deeper still, what truly holds you back is fear of who you will have to become if you step forward. You are not as afraid of the darkness as you are of what the light will require you to change. You are not afraid of where you are as much as you are afraid of who you will have to face when there is nowhere left to hide. And when I say this, I know you feel exposed. You feel exposed not because I accuse you, but because I touch the right place. You have learned to live comfortably with your current version of yourself, even knowing it is incomplete. That version has clear limits, familiar reflexes, and easy explanations. You know how far you can go, how much you can endure, what you can avoid. In that sense, darkness is no longer terrifying. It is familiar, predictable, and gives you a sense of control. What makes you tremble is not staying, but stepping out and no longer knowing how you will respond, what you will have to release, or how you will no longer be defined by old stories. There are fears you have never named, yet they operate powerfully. You fear that if you step into the light, you will no longer be allowed to be weak in the same way. You fear that the light will expose contradictions you have tried to conceal. You fear that you will have to take responsibility for your life in a new way, no longer hiding behind circumstances, no longer leaning on old wounds. I see how many times you have reached that threshold and then pulled your hand back, not because you do not long for the light, but because you do not yet trust that you can live in it without losing yourself. This fear is subtle. It does not shout or immediately panic you. It whispers, stay a little longer, wait a little more, be just a bit more certain. It clothes itself in the language of wisdom, caution, and self-protection. But if you listen closely, you will notice something. This fear does not ask what is true. It only asks what is safe. And safety, as you have come to understand it, often means not having to change too much. I do not blame you for being afraid. Fear does not make you weak. Avoidance is what keeps you trapped. What I am doing right now is not forcing you into the light by sheer power, but helping you look directly at the motive that has been holding you in place. When you realize that your fear is not the darkness itself, but the prospect of a new self, your breathing begins to deepen. You stop fighting a place, and you begin to face yourself. And that is the first step of healing. There is a paradox you need to understand. What you fear losing when you step forward is often not something I am taking away, but something that no longer fits who you have become. But because it is familiar, you cling to it. Because it is familiar, you call it yourself. You have lived within those limits long enough to believe that without them, you would fall apart. I know that feeling is real, but I also know that you outgrew those frames a long time ago. That is why you feel suffocated, tired, and strained just to remain there. Darkness does not imprison you by force. The fear of losing what is familiar is the real chain. When you begin to look straight at this fear, you will see that it is not only a fear of pain, but a fear of living differently, of believing differently, of loving differently, of walking without carrying your entire history as a shield. I am not asking you to resolve that fear immediately. I am only inviting you to pause long enough not to confuse it with darkness. When you name correctly what is holding you back, its power begins to diminish. It is no longer a vague shadow looming over you, but an emotion that can be faced. I know this moment makes you tremble. You tremble not because you are in danger, but because you are standing very close to the truth. And truth, even when it heals, always unsettles old structures. I am not telling you to be braver. I am telling you to breathe more deeply. When you breathe deeply, fear no longer pulls you instantly. You gain a small space to choose instead of react. And in that very small space, I am with you. I do not pull you out of darkness by erasing fear. I heal you by entering that fear with you. When you no longer have to run from what you are afraid of becoming, you will realize that light does not come to steal you away from yourself, but to return you to the true person who has been waiting to live. At this point, you do not yet need to step out. You only need to remain with me in the truth that has just been revealed. That is enough for this rhythm. There is a painful truth you begin to touch when you face your fear. Honestly, you are not only afraid of the unknown, you are also afraid of losing what is familiar, even when that familiarity is hurting you. You have lived long enough with certain patterns for them to become part of your identity. They wound you, but they also give you a sense of knowing what to do, how to respond, what to expect. The greater fear is not the darkness ahead, but letting go of what you have held so tightly, even though your hands are already tired. You may not call this a chain, because it does not look like captivity. It looks like stability. It looks like order. It looks like a predictable life. But look more closely every time you try to step forward. Something pulls you back, not by force, but by familiar memory. You remember times you tried to live differently and were hurt. You remember the disorientation of losing old reflexes, and so you stay. Not because you believe that place is good, but because you are afraid of who you would be if you were no longer there. This fear of losing what is familiar is subtle. It does not say, "Stay because this is right." It says, "Stay because this is familiar." You have associated familiarity with safety, even though deep down you know that this safety is purchased at the cost of contraction. You make yourself smaller so you will not be hurt again. You lower your expectations so you will not be disappointed. You tell yourself this is wisdom, maturity, knowing your limits. But I see clearly what is happening. You are imprisoning yourself in what is painfully familiar and calling it a reasonable choice. This chain makes no sound. It does not lock doors. It simply whispers that you have no other option. It tells you that this is who you are. This is how you live. This is your limit. And because you have listened to that voice for so long, you have begun to believe it. You no longer remember what freedom feels like, so you no longer desire it enough to risk stepping toward it. I am not saying this to shame you. I am saying it so you can see that familiarity can become a prison when it replaces life. There is a word I spoke long ago, and it still holds true for you now. Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. John 8:3-4. This is not only about obvious actions, but also about the patterns you have allowed to rule you. When you repeat the same choices out of fear, you are no longer choosing freely, you are being led. When you remain in what is painfully familiar, simply because it is familiar, you are no longer living from the light, but from invisible chains. I do not say this to condemn you, but to help you see that what is holding you back is not fate, but a dependency that is formed over time. That dependency does not make you bad, but it makes you smaller. It narrows your inner world until you no longer believe you can live differently. And because you do not believe, you do not try. Because you do not try, you stay. The circle feeds itself. You grieve that you are not moving forward. And then you cling again to what is familiar to soothe that grief. I see that circle, and I know you are tired of it. But being tired is not enough to leave. You also need understanding. When you begin to understand that the fear of losing familiarity is directing your choices, a very particular sadness arises. It is not the sadness of failure, but the sadness of realizing you have lived below what was possible. You grieve the capacities left unused, the rhythms you missed, the times you turned away from a calling simply because it unsettled you. That sadness does not break you, it softens you. And in that softness, you begin to understand why I have not forced you to step out, because if you have not yet recognized the chain as a chain, you will carry it with you wherever you go. I am not asking you to despise what is familiar. I am only asking you to call it by its true name. There are things that once helped you survive, but they were never meant to lead you far. When you hold on to them for too long, they become a burden. When you lay them down, you are not betraying your past. You are honoring it by refusing to let it decide your future. I do not ask you to break your chains by your own strength. I simply invite you to acknowledge that you are carrying them. In the moment you acknowledge this, a very quiet understanding takes place. You are not stuck because you are weak, but because you have grown accustomed to living within a limited frame of reference. When that frame begins to crack, light finds a way in. You do not need to rush to dismantle everything. You only need to stop calling the prison your home. That is enough for this step. I am here not to tear your chains away in one dramatic act, but to stand with you as you realize how long you have been carrying them. When understanding comes, you no longer belong to them completely. And when you no longer belong to them, freedom has already begun. Even if you have not yet stepped out, that beginning is very quiet, but it is real, and I see it in you. I am not telling you that when you step out, you will not tremble. I am not promising that fear will vanish at once, that your heart will not race, that your legs will not falter in the first moments. You are human, not stone. You carry memories. You carry scars. You carry times when you stepped forward and were hurt. I do not deny this, and I do not ask you to overcome it by your own strength. What I promise you is not emotional numbness, but presence. You will not be alone when you tremble. You have grown used to thinking that trembling is a sign of weakness. You believe that if you still tremble, it means you are not ready, not faithful enough, not strong enough to step into the light. But I see it differently. I see trembling as a sign of truth. You tremble because you are stepping out of an old zone of control. You tremble because you are no longer using familiar mechanisms to protect yourself. You tremble because you are living more honestly with what you feel. I am not ashamed of your trembling. I do not withdraw the light because you tremble. I step closer. There are times when you think that if you are not courageous enough, I will wait for someone else. You imagine that the light is only for those who step boldly. Speak loudly. Decide quickly. But I do not work that way. I do not choose you because you do not tremble. I am with you in the trembling itself. Your trembling does not distance me from you. It draws me nearer. For when you tremble, you are no longer pretending that you can control everything on your own. And that is the place where I can take hold of you without violating your freedom. I am not telling you that when you step out, you will not tremble. I am not promising that fear will vanish at once, that your heart will not race, that your legs will not falter in the first moments. You are human, not stone. You carry memories. You carry scars. You carry times when you stepped forward and were hurt. I do not deny this, and I do not ask you to overcome it by your own strength. What I promise you is not emotional numbness, but presence. You will not be alone when you tremble. You have grown used to thinking that trembling is a sign of weakness. You believe that if you still tremble, it means you are not ready, not faithful enough, not strong enough to step into the light. But I see it differently. I see trembling as a sign of truth. You tremble because you are stepping out of an old zone of control. You tremble because you are no longer using familiar mechanisms to protect yourself. You tremble because you are living more honestly with what you feel. I am not ashamed of your trembling. I do not withdraw the light because you tremble. I step closer. There are times when you think that if you are not courageous enough, I will wait for someone else. You imagine that the light is only for those who step boldly. Speak loudly. Decide quickly. But I do not work that way. I do not choose you because you do not tremble. I am with you in the trembling itself. Your trembling does not distance me from you. It draws me nearer. For when you tremble, you are no longer pretending that you can control everything on your own. And that is the place where I can take hold of you without violating your freedom. I am not telling you that when you step out, you will not tremble. I am not promising that fear will vanish at once, that your heart will not race, that your legs will not falter in the first moments. You are human, not stone. You carry memories. You carry scars. You carry times when you stepped forward and were hurt. I do not deny this, and I do not ask you to overcome it by your own strength. What I promise you is not emotional numbness, but presence. You will not be alone when you tremble. You have grown used to thinking that trembling is a sign of weakness. You believe that if you still tremble, it means you are not ready, not faithful enough, not strong enough to step into the light. But I see it differently. I see trembling as a sign of truth. You tremble because you are stepping out of an old zone of control. You tremble because you are no longer using familiar mechanisms to protect yourself. You tremble because you are living more honestly with what you feel. I am not ashamed of your trembling. I do not withdraw the light because you tremble. I step closer. There are times when you think that if you are not courageous enough, I will wait for someone else. You imagine that the light is only for those who step boldly. Speak loudly. Decide quickly. But I do not work that way. I do not choose you because you do not tremble. I am with you in the trembling itself. Your trembling does not distance me from you. It draws me nearer. For when you tremble, you are no longer pretending that you can control everything on your own. And that is the place where I can take hold of you without violating your freedom. I want you to hear this word not as a slogan, but as a truth kept for moments when you are weak. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. This word was not spoken to someone who had never been afraid. It was spoken to someone standing before a responsibility greater than his own strength. I do not say, "Do not tremble," and then walk away. I say, "Do not tremble." And I place my presence right beside those words. You need to understand this clearly. I do not promise that you will always feel secure. I promise that you will always be held. There will be moments when all you feel is a racing heart and shallow breath. But even when your emotions have not yet caught up, my presence remains there, not dependent on how you feel. You do not need to feel strong in order to be with me. You only need not to withdraw from the relationship. You may have lived through moments of trembling with no one beside you, moments when you had to steady yourself, brace yourself, and move forward in isolation. Those memories make you afraid of trembling again. You fear that if you are weak, you will be left behind. I know how deep that fear runs, but I am not like what you have known. I do not leave you when you are weak. I do not wait for you to be steady before I draw near. I draw near so that you may stand, even while your legs are still unsteady. When you tremble and yet remain, when you do not turn away, do not escape, you are doing something far greater than you realize. In the moment, you are breaking the bond between fear and loneliness. Before, fear always meant that you had to fend for yourself. Now, fear is accompanied by my presence. That changes how fear operates. It is no longer a signal forcing you to retreat. It becomes a place where you learn to cling to the light without needing to understand everything. I do not ask you to take a great leap all at once. I only invite you to step close enough to discover that the hand holding you does not let go when you tremble. There will be steps you take very slowly. There will be steps where you stop halfway just to breathe. I do not urge you to move faster. I simply remind you that you are not walking alone. And when you remember that, fear no longer has absolute authority. You may be surprised to find that trust does not come from the disappearance of fear, but from fear no longer causing you to turn away. You still tremble, but you do not withdraw your choice. You are still afraid, but you no longer imprison yourself in what is painfully familiar. You allow me to be there in the trembling itself instead of waiting until you feel better before returning. And in this, you are learning a new kind of courage, the courage to remain. I do not say that every step ahead will feel light, but I do say that every step you take, even while trembling, lies within what is held. Light does not require you to be steady before it shines. It shines so that you can step forward, even while your heart is still racing. When you allow yourself to tremble without retreating, you are stepping out of fear in the deepest way, not by denying it, but by trusting. I am with you not only when you are strong, but especially when you are weak. And as you begin to trust this, fear gradually loses its power. It does not vanish all at once, but it no longer rules. You no longer have to wait for the day when you stop trembling in order to live. You begin to live right within the trembling, with me beside you. And in this way, you are being healed at the root, not by becoming harder, but by being held more securely. There is a burden you have carried for a long time that you believed was necessary, the burden of proving that you are strong enough to step out. You have grown used to thinking that unless you appear steady, unless you demonstrate control, unless you wear the image of someone who has already overcome, you are not yet worthy of the light. And so, each time you prepare to step out of the darkness, you search for another layer of protection, another justification, another image to shield yourself. But I want you to hear this clearly. You do not step out to prove anything. You step out to return. Returning is not going back to a point in the past. It is returning to the true identity that has been covered over by too many roles and too many efforts at self-protection. You have worn armor that you believed was necessary to survive. Some pieces were called strength, some understanding, some endurance, some self-sufficiency. Each piece once helped you through a season. But hear this, what once helped you survive does not always help you live truthfully. When you wear it too long, it becomes heavy. It begins to chafe. It restricts your natural movement. You have seen this in the story of David, even if it feels familiar. When Saul placed his armor on David, his intention was not evil. He wanted to protect him. He wanted to equip him. But the armor did not fit David. Scripture records it simply. David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I am not used to them." 1 Samuel 1:7-9. David did not prevail by wearing the armor of a king, but by daring to remove it and stand in his true identity. Had David tried to prove that he could also wear Saul's armor, he would not have been able to move freely. So it is with you. There are ways you are living not because they are truly you, but because you believe this is how someone who has stepped out should live. You try to appear strong while inside you are in need of breath. You try to appear fine while your heart needs to be named honestly. You try to appear independent while what you truly need is a relationship that does not require you to perform. I do not need you to prove that you are strong enough to stand in the light. I need you to be honest enough to step into the light as you are. Darkness has defined you for long enough. It told you that you must try harder than others, defend yourself more than others, strain yourself more than others. It placed labels on you that you gradually accepted without noticing. And because you have lived with those labels for so long, you began to believe that if you removed them, you would no longer know who you are. But hear this, your identity was not formed in darkness. It is called forth in the light. I do not call you by what you did to survive. I call you by the true name I gave you from the beginning. When I say that you do not need to prove yourself, I am not saying that you do not need to step forward. I am saying that you do not need to carry the burden of becoming a different version of yourself in order to be accepted. Light does not require the right costume. It only requires your presence. When you lay down armor that does not fit, you may feel exposed, vulnerable, even a little ashamed. But it is precisely there that you begin to feel a lightness you have long forgotten. Light not because you are weaker, but because you no longer have to strain. There is a quiet unburdening that happens when you accept that you no longer need to prove anything. You stop comparing your pace with that of others. You stop trying to make your journey look reasonable, impressive, or admirable. You begin to walk as yourself, with your own stride length, with your own breath, and in that rhythm, you find greater peace, not because everything is finished, but because you are no longer playing a role. I do not invite you to return in order to make yourself smaller. I invite you to return so that you may stand in the right place. When you stand in the right place, you do not need to strain in order to be strong, nor do you need to perform in order to be believed. You simply remain there, within your true identity as it is gradually revealed. And when you are there, light is no longer something you must conquer. It becomes the place where you belong. You may still tremble as you lay down your armor. That is normal. Anyone who removes an old layer of protection will feel unfamiliar and exposed. But I do not leave you naked on the battlefield. I am there not to clothe you in another set of armor, but to cover you with my presence. You do not need to prove that you are strong enough to be kept. You are kept so that you may live in alignment with who you truly are. As you step forward in this way, you will begin to realize something very different from your original fear. You do not lose yourself when you release what is not you. You recover yourself, and that recovery is not loud or dramatic, but it is deeply real. It carries a new sense of steadiness, not rooted in image, but grounded in truth. From that place, you are able to keep moving without straining, without performing, without proving anything. You only need to return. There is a moment of great depth that you have never allowed yourself to remain in long enough, to the moment when you are called by your true name. Not the name you use to introduce yourself to others, not the role you are carrying, and not the labels you have attached to yourself in order to survive. I am speaking of the name that rises from the deepest place, the place you cannot name for yourself, the place only I can speak into. Darkness has spoken in my place for far too long. It has called you by what you lack, by what you have done wrong, by what you have not yet become. And because you have heard those voices repeated over time, you began to believe that they were your name. You have lived under those names for so long that you no longer recognize them as something you are carrying. You have called yourself fragile, someone who must try twice as hard, someone who cannot afford to fail again. You have called yourself the one who arrives late, the one who is not enough, the one who must always prove their worth. These names are rarely spoken aloud, yet they operate beneath every decision you make. They tell you where you are allowed to step, where you must stop, and how much you are permitted to hope. And because they are familiar, you no longer resist them. You live within an identity shaped by darkness, without realizing that it has never been the final truth about you. I do not wait for you to remove all those false names before I call you. I call you while you are still carrying them. And that call does not come as a correction, but as an affirmation that shatters every old definition. Scripture records my words clearly. Without ambiguity and without conditions, do not fear. For I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Isaiah 4:3-1. This word does not say that you must fix yourself before I call you. It says that I call you first, and that the call itself reshapes who you are. When you truly hear this call, something within you breaks open. Not a breaking of pain, but a breaking of release. You realize that you have been carrying too many names that were never yours. You have lived as though belonging had to be earned. Yet within my call, belonging comes before all effort. You are not called because you are good enough. You are called because you are mine. This truth unsettles every identity structure you have built on fear and comparison. Being called by your true name does not always feel comfortable at first. At times it moves you so deeply that you do not know how to respond. You may feel the urge to weep, to pause, to let go of things you have been holding tightly. For if your true name is not what darkness has spoken, then you must face a profound question. How will you live from here on? That question is both freeing and frightening. Freeing because you are no longer imprisoned by old definitions, and frightening because you can no longer hide behind them. When I call you by your true name, I do not only tell you who you are, I also remove the authority of darkness to define you. Darkness used pain to name you. It said you were your wounds, your past, the things that happened to you, but I do not call you by what hurt you. I call you by what I created. And between those two voices, you must choose which one will guide your life forward. I do not force you to choose immediately. I allow both voices to remain long enough for you to discern the difference. There is a fragile moment when you begin to believe that your true name is not what you have feared all along. That moment both breaks you open and lifts you up. You feel yourself becoming smaller not because you are diminished, but because you no longer need to strain to be large. You realize that you do not need to become someone else in order to dwell in the light. You only need to stop believing the names that were given to you in the darkness. And stopping that belief does not happen in a single day. It happens each time you hear my call and choose to trust it a little more. I know there will be times when you doubt. You will wonder whether this call truly applies to you, or whether it is only a beautiful idea. Those doubts do not cause me to withdraw my call. I do not call you once and then stop. I call you again and again in moments when you forget, in times when you put the old labels back on. Each time I call, I am not angry that you forgot. I am patient, because I know that the reshaping of identity takes time. Being called by your true name does not turn you into a different person overnight. It gives you a new ground on which to stand. From that ground, you begin to look back at old choices and see that they no longer fit, not because they were wrong, but because they were born from an identity you no longer carry. You begin to choose differently, not to prove anything, but because you no longer need old mechanisms in order to survive. You choose from belonging, not from the fear of exclusion. When you remain long enough within this call, you will find a deep quietness. You no longer need to compete for your identity. You no longer need to compare yourself, nor to defend an image. You no longer have to explain who you are through achievements or failures. You are called, and that call is enough. It does not separate you from life. It anchors you more firmly within it. You walk with a new steadiness, not because everything is clear, but because you know to whom you belong. I am not calling you in order to place a new pressure upon you. I am calling you to release the old ones. When you hear and trust that call, you no longer have to chase the light as a goal. You dwell in the light as a home, and from that place, you can continue forward, not to search for yourself, but to live from the self that has already been rightly named. There is a very deep fear you carry whenever you think about stepping out of the darkness, the fear that you will lose yourself. You fear that if you no longer hold on to old reflexes, old defenses, old ways of surviving, you will become disoriented, empty, unsure of who you are. That fear is not irrational. It was born from times when you had to change in order to survive, when you were forced to bend to circumstances, to expectations, to pain, because those changes kept you alive. You began to believe that if you let them go, you would fall apart. I want you to hear this very slowly when you step out. You do not lose yourself. You find yourself again. What you have long called yourself was largely formed through reaction. You became that way because you had to. You learned to be silent to avoid further harm. You learned to brace yourself so as not to be diminished. You learned to control so that chaos would not return. None of these were wrong. They were survival strategies. But survival is not the destination. And if you continue living by strategies that have already completed their task, you will have no room left to live truthfully. Stepping out does not take away who you truly are. It removes the layers that have concealed your true self for far too long. There is a paradox you can only understand once you dare to step forward. What you thought was you was, in fact, what you learned in order not to break. And what you fear you will lose was never the core of who you are. When you remain in darkness long enough, darkness begins to lend you an identity. It tells you that you are someone who must be guarded, someone who is not allowed to hope for much, someone who should only go so far. You wear that identity like a coat, just warm enough to keep you from freezing. But when you step into the light, that coat becomes too thick, too heavy, too suffocating. Taking it off does not erase you. It allows you to breathe. I know you fear the emptiness that may appear when you lay those old layers down. You fear that without familiar reflexes you will not know what to do, how to respond, how to live. But that emptiness is not loss, it is space. Space for you to hear your own inner voice without it being drowned out by fear. Space for you to choose, not because you must, but because you desire to live truthfully. Space for your true identity compressed for so long to finally have room to exist. I do not rush to fill that space with new commands or new molds. I leave it open, so you can learn to remain there without panic. When you step out with the posture of returning, you will discover something very different from what you imagined. You do not become more fragile, you become clearer. You do not lose direction, you stop running in directions that were never yours. You do not become weaker, you stop expending strength resisting yourself. The new stability you feel does not come from everything being settled, but from no longer being pulled by old definitions. You stand firm not because you control better, but because you no longer need to control as before. You may be surprised to see that when you stop holding yourself together by old means, life does not collapse as you feared. Some things will leave, yes. Some relationships will change shape, yes. Some rhythms will no longer fit, yes. But what leaves is not you. These are things that clung to you when you did not yet know who you were apart from them. When they fall away, you are not emptied. You are freed to become whole in a different way. I do not promise that you will immediately feel completely yourself. Returning does not happen in a single moment. It unfolds little by little. Each time you choose to live from your called identity rather than from old fear. Each time you resist reacting by habit and pause to ask what is true. Each time you refuse to put the old coat back on simply because it is familiar. Those small choices accumulate, and before you realize it, you find yourself standing more firmly within yourself, not because you added something, but because you let go of what was not essential. When you find yourself again in this way, you do not become detached from life. On the contrary, you become more fully present, because you no longer live defensively. You can love without as much calculation as before, because you no longer live to prove yourself. You can work without being driven by fear of failure, because you no longer live to protect an image. You can rest without guilt. This is not resignation. This is stability rooted in true identity. I am not calling you to step out so that you may become some ideal version of yourself. I am calling you to step out so that you may stop being distant from yourself. When you remain in the light with the posture of returning, you will see that what you have long been seeking does not lie ahead as a reward, but within as a restoration. You do not need to rebuild yourself from the beginning. You only need to allow what is not truly you to fall away. And in that process, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself again, little by little, in a quietness that needs no proof. There is something I want you to understand so that you stop waiting in the wrong place. Miracles do not wait until you are completely out of the darkness. Miracles appear the moment you turn away from it. You have grown used to thinking that first you must escape entirely. See full light. Stand in safety. And only then will a miracle occur. But that is not how I work. I do not bring dawn after the sky is already bright. I let the first light appear while night still remains. The moment you turn, even when the light is not yet enough to show the whole path, I have already begun. You may not notice this, because you are looking for something large. You want the sun fully risen, the picture clear, all doubt gone before you believe a miracle is underway. But I work in a different rhythm. I work in the moment you say enough to what pulls you back. even while your feet are still close to the darkness. I work when you cannot yet go far. But you have changed direction. Changing direction is the pivotal point you have often underestimated. Remember the night before the sea opened. My people stood facing the water, the enemy behind them, and a path that did not yet exist before them. They had not crossed to the other shore. They had not even seen the road. But the miracle was not waiting for them on safe ground. The miracle began the moment they turned their backs on Egypt and faced the sea according to my word. That night, water was still water, wind was still wind, and darkness was still thick. Yet the process had already begun. I did not wait until they were out of danger. I made a way in the very midst of danger when they chose direction. It is the same with you. The miracle in your life is not the moment when you look back and say that everything is over. The miracle is the moment when you are still trembling, still unsure, still very close to the old things, and yet you decide not to turn back. You turn away, and the instant your back turns, I begin. You may not feel anything yet. You may still hear the old voices calling. You may still see darkness stretching ahead of you. But dawn has already begun. Even though it is not yet fully light, there is a particular kind of astonishment when you realize this. Astonishment because you were waiting for the miracle at the end of the road, while it was already present at the very first step. Astonishment because you thought you needed great strength, while what I needed was clarity of direction. Astonishment because you believed you had to be clean, steady, and without hesitation, while I began working right in the middle of confusion. That astonishment does not overwhelm you. It leads you into trust. Trust not because you see everything, but because you realize I was already there before you thought yourself worthy. Dawn does not break forth in a single instant. It spreads very slowly. The first light does not erase the night at once. It is only enough to distinguish direction. I work in this rhythm so you may learn how to walk without needing to control everything. If I were to give you full light immediately, you would move quickly, but you would not learn how to trust step by step. I want you to move forward not because you see everything clearly, but because you have turned in the right direction and recognize that I am walking with you. When you turn away, you may still be pulled by old habits, old voices, old fears. That does not stop the miracle. The miracle does not require you to cut every tie in a single night. It only asks that you do not turn back to tighten them again. Each time you do not turn back, the wind continues to blow. Each time you do not change direction, the waters continue to part. You do not see this process with natural eyes, but it is taking place. I know you want a clear marker to say that from this point on, everything is different. But there are breakthroughs that do not arrive with sound, but with a very small movement at a deep level. The moment you turn away, a chain of unseen things begins to shift. Old connections start to loosen. Invisible resistances begin to lose their hold. Doors you have not yet touched begin to move. You do not see it, so you doubt. But doubt cannot stop what has already been set in motion. You may feel that you are moving very slowly in the early days. That does not mean the miracle is weak. It means the miracle is working in the right place. I do not only want to bring you to the other shore, I want to shape you into someone who can live there. That is why I begin with your direction of sight, with the decision to turn away. With a first step that is still imperfect, you move forward not because you are already completely different, but because you are being renewed from the root. When you trust this, you begin to move in a different way. You no longer wait for everything to be clear before you step. You step so that clarity may gradually come. You no longer demand that the miracle prove itself before you believe. You believe so that the miracle may continue to open. That faith is not loud. It is like walking on in a dawn that has not yet fully brightened. Knowing that the sun is rising, even though you cannot yet see it in fullness. I am not telling you to deny the darkness that remains. I am telling you not to turn your back on the rising light. The miracle does not lie in the night disappearing at once, but in the fact that your direction has changed, and once direction is changed, the process does not reverse. You may stop to breathe, but you do not need to turn back. You may move slowly, but you do not need to doubt that I have begun. Hold this in your heart when you feel you have not gone far if you have turned away. The miracle is already in motion. Dawn does not need you to rush it. It needs you to remain facing the right direction. And in that right direction, each small step will carry you forward. Even while the light is still gentle, even while the night has not fully withdrawn, I am working. From that very first step, you often think that only large decisions produce significant change. You wait for a step that is strong enough, clear enough, decisive enough to leave everything behind at once. But I want you to see this. It is the very small steps, when placed in the right direction, that are shaking what you cannot see. Not because they are loud, but because they touch the foundation. The inner world does not change through leaps. It changes through the quiet persistence of each step you choose not to turn back. You may feel that the steps you are taking are too small to matter. You think that one day of not returning to an old habit means little. One moment of silence instead of reaction seems unnoticed. A decision that is gentle, private, and hidden does not seem worthy of being called a breakthrough. But I am seeing what you do not see. Each small step creates a ripple, and that ripple does not stop at the surface. It travels into deep layers beyond your control, where old structures have taken root. You have grown used to measuring progress by what can be seen immediately. You want the clear feeling that you are different, stronger, beyond what was before. But the things that shape you for the long term rarely create instant sensation. When you choose a small step in the light, unseen things begin to shift, invisible ties weaken, old cycles lose momentum, reflexes that were once strong begin to slow. You do not see it, so you doubt. But doubt cannot halt what is happening beneath the surface. Think of still water. A small stone does not create a great wave, but it sends out rings that travel farther than you expect. Each ring touches places you were not watching. This is how I am working in you. Each small step does not only affect that moment, it reaches future decisions, future reactions, choices you have not yet faced. The power of a small step does not lie in how it feels, but in the direction in which it spreads. There is a paradox you must learn so you do not lose heart. My great power often comes clothed in very small forms. You have grown accustomed to looking for large signs to believe that I am at work. But I do not build you through constant upheaval. I build through repeated faithfulness. When you choose a small step today, you are not only addressing today, you are shaping the person who will stand more firmly tomorrow. You may not see it yet, but it is real. You may still have days when you slip back, moments when you are tired and want to stop. I do not erase the process because of a single hesitation. A small step is not nullified by a moment of weakness. What brings the process to a halt is not slowness, but turning back toward the old direction. As long as your face remains turned toward the light, whether your steps are short or long, I continue working in layers you cannot see. You need to understand that what is being shaken is not only circumstances, but the internal systems within you. Old beliefs are being challenged. The ways you once defined yourself are being loosened. Voices that were once familiar are gradually losing their authority. You do not hear the sound of collapse, because this is not an external building. These are spiritual and emotional structures that have existed for a long time. They do not fall with a crash, they loosen. Little by little, each time you stop giving them what they need to survive your return to them. You may wonder why you still feel weak even though you have already come some distance. You think that if the process were real, you should feel much stronger by now. But I do not measure strength by feeling. I measure it by endurance. A small step repeated builds endurance that a large step cannot sustain. You are being formed not to burst forward and then burn out, but to remain standing when emotions are no longer carrying you. As you continue taking small steps, you will notice that things which once triggered intense reactions no longer hold the same power, not because they have disappeared, but because your inner foundation has changed. You are no longer pulled immediately. You have a small pause before reacting. That pause is the sign of real breakthrough. It gives you freedom to choose, and the freedom to choose is the authority I am restoring within you. I know you want to see clear results, so you can be sure you are not going the wrong way. But if I showed you everything that is being shaken, you would be afraid. You would want to intervene, to control, to accelerate. I keep these things out of your sight not to conceal them, but to protect the process. You only need to be faithful to the step before you. What you do not see, I am handling. There is a very quiet strength forming as you walk steadily. It does not excite you, but it steadies you. It does not give you the feeling of a great victory, but it gives you the ability to remain standing without collapse. And that ability will carry you farther than any dramatic leap. You do not need to shake the world with major decisions. As long as you continue in the right direction, the world within you is being shaken enough. I am not in a hurry to show you results, because I am laying a foundation, and a foundation is tested only when the wind comes. When new challenges arise, you will be surprised that you no longer react as you once did. Only then will you realize that the small steps you once thought insignificant have accomplished far more than you imagined. But right now, you do not need to see. You only need to keep stepping very small, very real, very faithful. I am present in every step, shaking loose the things you did not even know were holding you. There is a quiet pressure you carry as you walk into this new light, the pressure to be certain of the entire path. You want to know where you are going, what you will lose, what you will gain, whom you will face, and whether you have the strength to go all the way. You think that without a clear view of the whole, you should not step forward, but I do not lead you that way. I do not give you a complete map, not because I am hiding it, but because if you saw everything, you would return to control instead of trust. What I look for in you is not total certainty, but faithfulness to the next step. You are used to preparing for every possibility. You want to anticipate risk, so you will not be caught off guard. You want to know what will happen, so you will not have to tremble. But, my child, if you only step when everything is clear, you will never learn to walk by faith. I am not calling you into complete darkness. I simply do not give you excess light. The light I give is always sufficient, but only sufficient for the step where you stand. That is not lack, it is care. There is a word written not for decoration, but to become the rhythm of life for souls walking in the night. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119:105. Listen carefully to this image. It is not the sun flooding an entire field. It is not light for the whole journey. It is a lamp for your feet, for the step directly in front of you. This light does not show you 10 steps ahead. It shows you one step safe enough to place your foot. You may find this uncomfortable, because it forces you to live in the present instead of escaping into the future. When you cannot see far, you cannot run ahead. You must stay with the step you are taking, the emotion you are carrying, the choice before you. I know you are not used to this. You have used the future as a place to escape the present for too long. But the lamp I hold does not shine where you want to flee. It shines where you are standing. You may breathe out when you realize that I am not asking you to carry the entire road. You only need to be faithful to the next step. Faithfulness is not doing something great. Faithfulness is not overlooking the small thing I place before you. A conversation that requires truth. A decision that requires integrity. A moment of not returning to an old reflex. A step no one sees. No one praises. No one records. Those steps, when placed in my light, are enough to keep you moving. I know you fear that if you can only see one step, you might go the wrong way without realizing it. But, my child, direction is not kept by seeing far. It is kept by facing correctly. When you turn your face toward me, the lamp will always be in the right place. You do not need to strain to predict where I am leading you. I am not playing riddles with you. I lead you step by step, and each step carries enough light for itself. There will be times when you grow weary of walking without knowing the outcome. You will want to stop until you can see more clearly. But if you wait for light for the entire road, you will stand still for a very long time. Full light appears only after you have walked through. It is seen when you look back, not while you are stepping forward. I do not give you retrospective light at the beginning of the journey. I give you present light at the moment you need it. As you learn to be faithful to the next step, something very gentle will happen within you. You stop straining to understand everything. You stop trying to control what has not yet come. You place your foot down and feel the ground holding you. Even though you do not know the road ahead, trust. At this point, is not a powerful feeling. It is an exhale. An exhale because you are no longer carrying the weight of the entire future on your shoulders. I do not promise that the next step will always be easy. Some steps will take you into unfamiliar territory. Some steps will require you to release more of the old. But I promise that the lamp will not go out halfway. You may not see far, but you will not be left in the dark. Each time you are faithful to the next step, you are saying that you trust me more than your ability to predict. And that is where the miracle continues to unfold quietly. But truly, you do not need to ask me today where this whole journey will lead. You only need to ask what the next step is, and whether you are willing to place your foot down. When you do that, you are not only moving forward, you are learning to live in my rhythm. That rhythm is not hurried, not forcing, not anxious. It is slow enough that you do not lose yourself, and bright enough that you do not lose your way. When you look back one day, you will see that the path was opened little by little, at the right time, in the right rhythm. You will realize that if I had shown you everything from the beginning, you would not have been able to walk it, not because you were weak, but because you would have tried to walk it in your own way. The light for each step kept you from that. It kept you in relationship, in listening, in faithfulness, one step at a time. Now, you do not need to do anything more than place your foot on the next step that is being illuminated. You do not need to be certain. You only need to be present. The light is there, and as long as you walk within that light, the path will continue to open just enough, at the right moment, no more and no less. I am walking with you, not at the end of the road, but right at the step you are taking now. When you step forward, the first thing that changes is not your circumstances, but the climate of your soul. You have grown used to thinking that peace is a reward that comes after everything is settled, after risk has disappeared, after you no longer have to face what tightens you inside. But I tell you this truth, peace does not come after everything is resolved. Peace comes when you are in the right place. And the right place is not an external location, but the inner posture from which you are standing. In the past, you experienced peace as passing gusts of wind. At times it came quickly, bringing relief, only to leave just as quickly when circumstances shifted. You learned to cling to those winds, hoping they would return, fearing when they disappeared. But the peace I am placing within you does not operate that way. It is not wind, it is climate. It does not come and go with events. It surrounds and shapes the entire space of your soul. When the climate changes, you no longer live by short-term reactions. You begin to live from a deeper stability. This climate of the soul does not create intense sensations right away. It does not excite you or overwhelm you. It makes you light in a very unfamiliar way. Light because you no longer have to keep adjusting yourself to every small shift in the wind. You are no longer living in a state of constant alertness, always preparing for what might go wrong. You begin to notice that even on difficult days, the air within you is different. It is not as suffocating as before. It gives you space to breathe, to think, to choose without being driven. This peace does not depend on everything being finished. You may still be in the middle of a process, still facing what is unclear, still holding questions without answers, but they no longer pull you along. You are standing under a different sky. Before, a small disturbance could change the entire color of your inner world. Now, those disturbances are like clouds passing through, not enough to alter the whole climate. You see more clearly, more deeply, and because of that, you respond more slowly. Slowness not because you are passive, but because you are no longer being tugged. When you are in the right place, you do not need to manufacture peace. You do not need to reassure yourself through reason or repeated reminders. Peace is not something you have to hold. It is something that is holding you. It becomes the ground, not the goal. You no longer chase a sense of calm. You live from a stability that has been placed within you. And for that reason, you do not panic when emotions rise and fall. You no longer define yourself by each passing state. There is a deep lightness that accompanies this change of climate. Light because you no longer have to strain to remain in the light. Light because you no longer have to prove that you are okay. Light because you allow what is unfinished to exist without treating it as a threat. Before, everything had to be settled for you to have peace. Now, you have enough peace to face what is not yet settled. This reversal is subtle, but it transforms the way you live. You begin to see that peace does not remove movement, it recalibrates rhythm. You still walk, still decide, still change, but without haste, without inner tug of war, without the sense of being pulled in multiple directions at once. When the climate of your soul changes, you no longer have to constantly ask whether you are doing the right thing. You sense being in the right place through a quiet stillness within. Even when outward results have not yet appeared. I know you once thought that being in the right place would make everything much easier. But being in the right place does not mean without difficulty. It means not torn apart. You can face challenges without being divided. You can feel sadness without despair. You can be tired without wanting to run away. These are signs of a new climate. Your soul no longer reacts in extremes to every small change. When peace becomes the ground, you also stop searching for emotional highs to confirm that you are living rightly. You no longer need special feelings to believe you are on the right path. You learn to trust steadiness more than emotion. This matures you in a very quiet way. You no longer need constant stimulation. You can keep walking even when nothing feels new, because you know you are living within the right climate. When the climate of your soul changes, those around you may not notice right away. There are no loud signs, no grand declarations, but you will recognize it clearly in small moments: how you wake up in the morning, how you respond to a difficult word, how you make decisions without prolonged inner struggle. These moments tell you that peace is no longer a visitor, it has become a resident. I do not give you this climate when you are perfect. I place it within you when you choose the right place. The right place is not where there is no darkness, but where you do not turn away from the light. When you remain there long enough, peace is no longer something you seek, it becomes the space you live in. And from that space, everything else will be seen, chosen, and released in a new way. The new season I am leading you into does not come with noise. It does not arrive through dramatic decisions, does not require you to make grand declarations, and does not force you to break your old life in a single moment. If you are waiting for a loud sign to know that you have crossed into another season, you may miss what I am doing. For the clearest sign of a new season is not outward upheaval, but an inward settling. You stop pulling yourself in two directions. You stop dragging yourself back and forth. You begin to know what you are doing without having to argue with yourself for so long. Before, every choice exhausted you, not because the choices were difficult, but because you had to convince yourself too much. You wanted to move forward and yet wanted to stay. You could see the light and yet feared losing what was familiar. Each small decision triggered a long inner monologue, draining you before you even acted. But when a new season begins, the first thing I do is not take you somewhere else, but lift the fog from your mind. Fog is not thick darkness. It is the haze that keeps you from discerning direction. When the fog clears, you do not need more strength, you only need to see. The clarity of the new season does not come as a loud voice, but as the quiet end of forcing yourself to believe that something is right. You begin to realize that some doors you once struggled to hold no longer require much effort to release. Not because you are stronger, but because you are no longer bound as before. You stop explaining at length to yourself why you should stay. You also stop searching for reasons to justify leaving. What is right becomes light. What is no longer right becomes heavy. And that very sense begins to guide you. I know you once believed that clarity had to come from understanding every reason, but understanding is not the source of peace. The clarity I give you is not a list of arguments, it is inner alignment. When you are in the right rhythm, you no longer have to drag your heart along with a decision. Your heart moves with the decision. This brings a strange kind of ease, not because life has no difficulties, but because you are no longer torn between opposing directions. The new season does not make you hurried. It slows you down naturally. You slow because you are no longer running from silence. You slow because you no longer feel the need to fill every gap with action or words. In that slowness, you begin to hear very small things more clearly, a sense of something no longer fitting, a relationship whose rhythm has shifted, a habit that no longer gives you life. Before, you may have overlooked these signals because you were busy keeping everything intact. Now, as the fog lifts, you see them clearly without needing to dig. There are ordinary, everyday changes that tell you you are in a new season. You no longer react immediately when triggered. You no longer feel the need to over-explain your choices. You no longer feel guilty for saying no to what drains you. These changes do not make you cold, they make you more honest. Honest about your strength. Honest about your rhythm. Honest about what is being asked of you in this season. I know you once thought that if you were no longer struggling, it meant you had given up. But giving up is not the same as letting go. Giving up is neglect. Letting go is setting down what no longer belongs to you. The new season teaches you this distinction through experience, not theory. You do not need to force yourself to release. When the fog clears, your hands loosen naturally. You no longer cling because you no longer fear falling as you once did. Peace has become the ground beneath you, so you no longer need to hold on to what once gave you a false sense of safety. The clarity of the new season also quiets your constant search for external validation. You no longer need so many affirmations in order to move forward. Not because you have become proud, but because you have stopped distrusting the voice within. When you are in the right place, you no longer have to keep asking whether you are allowed to live this way. You begin to permit yourself to live according to what has been placed in your heart, even when others do not yet understand. This gives rise to a confidence that is calm, neither performative nor defensive. You may find it strange to realize that the new season does not arrive with a surge of excitement. It arrives with lightness. Lightness because you no longer have to drag yourself through each day. Lightness because you are no longer resisting the inner current. Lightness because you begin to live more integrated, no longer splitting yourself to satisfy multiple directions. I call this ease not because you do nothing, but because you stop doing what does not belong to your rhythm. When the fog lifts, you do not need to announce that you have entered a new season. You simply continue living in that clarity. Decisions come more easily. Boundaries are kept without prolonged debate. What no longer fits falls away without you having to push it. The new season does not require your cooperation through forceful effort. It requires your cooperation through faithfulness to what is clear. I do not lead you into a new season so that you can prove you have changed. I lead you into it so that you can stop struggling. When you stop struggling, your energy is released for what truly matters. You no longer waste strength on old inner battles. You begin to live with a steadier, more sustainable rhythm, even if outwardly little has changed. And it is precisely within that steadiness that you are stepping more deeply into what I am preparing. There is something very subtle you only recognize once you have moved far enough away from the darkness. What you thought you were losing was never truly yours. When you were still standing at the old threshold, every departure felt like deprivation. You looked at fading relationships, dissolving roles, closing doors, and you called them losses. But when the climate of your soul changes, you begin to see the truth differently. Not everything that once rested in your hands was given to you to keep. Some things were only allowed to walk with you for a while, long enough to teach you what you needed to learn, then they had to leave, so that you would not confuse what was temporary with what belongs to your identity. You suffered because you named as yours what was never entrusted to you to possess. You called an old rhythm yours, though it was only a temporary shelter. You called a connection yours, though it was built on shared fear rather than life. You called a familiar feeling yours, though it existed only to spare you from facing the new. When you stepped forward, those things fell away, and it felt as though something had been taken from you. But I did not take what belongs to you. I only returned what you had been holding by mistake. Remember the moment when Lot left Sodom. It was a city where he had lived, built, and grown accustomed. It gave him position, possessions, and a sense of outward stability. Yet when the time came to leave, He hesitated. He did not hesitate because he loved what was evil. He hesitated because he had become familiar with the place. Scripture records this hesitation plainly, without concealment. But when Lot lingered, the men seized his hand, and the hand of his wife, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. Genesis 1:9, 1:6. What I want you to see is not the image of a weak man, but of a soul being asked to leave a place it had called home, even though that place was no longer safe for the life within. When Lot stepped out, he lost many things. He lost position. He lost familiarity. He lost what had once defined his daily life. From the outside, it looked like a flight marked by loss, but from my rhythm, it was a rescue, not because I desired to take things away, but because what remained would have consumed him. What departed were not blessings stripped away, they were burdens removed. So it is with you. When you step out and find that you have lost certain things, you need to ask again whether those things truly belong to you, or whether they were simply what you learned to cling to in order to avoid facing a deeper fear. There are things you hold not because they nourish you, but because you fear the emptiness that might follow if you let go. But emptiness is not what I fear for you. Emptiness is space for what is true to be placed within. Crowdedness is what becomes dangerous, when there is no room left to breathe, to grow, or to change. When you look back at what has fallen away with a new inner climate, gratitude begins to enter quietly. It is not gratitude for having endured, but gratitude for having been protected. You realize that if those things had remained, you would not have been able to move forward. If those people had kept their former roles, you would not have been able to live truthfully. If those structures had not collapsed, you would have continued to contort yourself to fit within them. Gratitude comes not because the pain has vanished, but because its meaning has changed. There is a spiritual paradox you are learning through experience rather than theory. Loss is not always defeat, and holding on is not always victory. You once believed that keeping many things meant safety, but some things, the longer you hold them, the more they slow you down. There are things you must lose in order to become lighter, not poorer. When you step out at the right time, you are not drained. You are made empty so you can receive what is more fitting. And what is more fitting does not arrive in haste. It comes when you are calm enough not to cling. I know there will be moments when you look back and wonder whether you moved too quickly. You will remember what has gone and feel a trace of regret. That regret does not make you wrong. It simply shows that you once cared deeply. But do not let regret deceive you into believing you lost what truly belonged to you. What truly belongs to you does not require you to trade your inner life to keep it. It does not demand the sacrifice of peace. It does not pull you into constant inner conflict. It does not require you to become smaller in order to fit. When you are in the new season, you will discover that what I give does not come as a direct replacement for what you lost. I do not substitute each thing one by one according to your expectations. I give you a different foundation to stand on. And from that foundation, what comes next will not resemble what has passed. You do not receive a copy of the past. You receive what is appropriate to the identity that is growing. And for that reason, if you keep looking backward to compare, you will not immediately recognize the value of what is arriving. Gratitude in this season is not loud. It is not an emotional surge. It is a deep exhale when you realize you no longer have to strain to hold what no longer sustains your life. It is the calm that comes when you see yourself no longer in situations that once caused your soul to contract. It is the lightness of realizing that some losses are, in truth, the cutting away of what no longer carries life. I did not lead you out of darkness so you could count what has fallen away. I led you out so you could learn to distinguish what belongs to identity from what is merely context. When you learn that distinction, you no longer fear loss as you once did. You understand that if something departs in the light, it has not been stolen, it has completed its purpose. And in that understanding, your heart gradually fills with a gratitude that is quiet, genuine, and enduring. Thank you for listening to today's message. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so we can continue receiving the living word together, building a firm faith and walking in the boundless love of God. Amen.